Biden isn't fooling anyone. When it comes to genocide and war crimes, Biden never gave Israel a red line. All he ever gave them was a green light.
There's a pattern of Israel bombing and killing people in Gaza, then claiming it made a mistake.
This tragic mistake.
And this mistake in war, a mistake was made.
Is a grave mistake.
Only after there's public outcry.
At the same time, there's a real risk of continued escalation, especially with regard to Lebanon and Hezbollah. Let's put this up on the screen. Israeli leaders have threatened to take, quote unquote, more intense action against Hezbollah after an escalation in cross-border fire, increasing tensions and the prospect of all-out war with the Lebanese militant group. You'll recall northern Israel has largely been evacuated since October 7th. So you have quite a number of Israelis who have been evacuated from that area. You've had this cross-border fire ongoing. And Netanyahu commented, he said yesterday, the earth was on fire here, but it was also on fire in Lebanon. Whoever thinks that they can hurt us and that we will sit idly by is making a big mistake. We are prepared for very intense action in the north. One way or another, we will restore security to the north. So, you know, Sagar, there have been all kinds of threats towards Lebanon. Previously, we also have new reports once again of more Israeli use of white phosphorus being dropped directly on residential areas. That is in direct contradiction of international law. So yet another war crime being documented by human rights organizations that are on the ground. And, you know, one possibility here, if there is enough pressure applied, that there's some sort of even a temporary ceasefire in terms of Gaza, you could see this escalation occurring as a way, again, for Bibi to continue to justify his grip on power and his avoidance, too, of the criminal charges that could possibly land him in prison.
Go ahead, pull it, is what Bibi says, as he has his grip on power, which is the nickname for his member. I'm pretty sure I understood what she was saying right there. I want to make sure you guys understood too. What's there to be thought about there, Scott?
You know, one of the things that I just kind of like stood out to me was just in the first clip, they talk about red lines. Like you have all these red lines, you know what I mean? Like, oh, and it's like, and obviously the goalpost keeps getting moved down the line. But at the same time, they tweet, they talk about how, and they campaign on unconditional support for Israel. So how can you have a red line and unconditional support? It seems like those kind of are conflicting ideas, right? So,
but if you just put an equal sign between them, everything's good.
Exactly.
That's equality. That's equity.
Mm-hmm. So that doesn't make sense. I mean, it's like you can put all of these, you could posture yourself like you're gonna, okay, if you guys do this, then we'll do this, and then that happens and nothing happens. Then it just shows the fecklessness of the whole process and the whole system and the whole everything, and how they're just beholden to them unconditionally, you know. And so
fecklessness.
Yeah, it's like it's like there are the unconditional support is like almost involuntary. It's like, no, you will unconditionally support us or else, you know what I mean? They're not doing it as like a thing of grace and graciousness. We're not doing it out of the goodness of our hearts. Doing it because we unconditionally support you, because otherwise you're going to expose all the photos of me diddling kids. Like that's where the unconditional support comes from.
One nation under blackmail. Only thing inaccurate about that 2-volume set is it's not just one nation, but that's all she had time to tell you about.
Fair enough. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, you know, all these terrible mistakes that they keep making over time. This was a terrible mistake too, as a matter of fact. Remember the USS Liberty, 50 what it would be like 56th anniversary at this point. It's been a long time for those fellas, but they're still kicking and they're still looking for justice, and people are starting to listen to them now because they get it. Like 56 years on, people can see, hey, Israel might have a little influence on our government, enough to cover up the killing of its military personnel, as well as it covers up the bribing of its congressional and blackmailing of congressional personnel, right? And all these terrible mistakes that were listed between those two videos, I couldn't help but think, right? I'm sure they're going to have some help. Neuralink will help you think, so you won't be able to have these thoughts. But I couldn't help but observe from a perspective of security that when Israelis offer security to Palestinians, it's an awful lot like when Nazis offered showers to Jews. allegedly, because that's the narrative. And if it weren't so morbid, I think more people would probably look into that narrative, and they might find similar Hasbara as what you've seen for the last 7 months. But I don't know about such things because I heard about the noticing laws, so not allowed to notice those things. But I do want to notice this next story. I'm going to take you here. This is not the Washington Post. This is not BBC. Let's just go to the Times of India. Let's see how a country of 1 billion people, how they might observe. They call it a bloody massacre. A bloody massacre. Palestinian president calls for emergency UN Security Council meeting after Israeli strike kills over 210. So if we scroll down, we're going to read New Delhi. Oh, man, it makes me hungry. Palestinian President Abbas on Saturday called for an emergency UN Security Council meeting after Israeli strikes at al-Nusrat refugee camp in Gaza killed at least 210, news agency Wafa reported. Meanwhile, Israeli forces rescued 4 hostages. That's a 50-to-1 ratio, if you notice such things. However, it wasn't clear if both incidents were part of the same operation. So they're like, how do we print this and get away with it? We'll just say it was unclear if when they killed the 210 plus people, if it had anything to do with the 4 people they rescued. According to an Israeli military spokesman, Hamas had been hiding hostages among Gazan residents. Let me ask you, where else could they hide hostages? Because they're all in a camp together. Like, is there someplace else that doesn't have residents that you can hide people? I don't think so. So it's like, okay, they hid them where they had to hide them, which isn't even really hiding them if you have special forces teams. Guarded by armed militants, people who live there who have armaments, because they're under occupation and they're allowed to resist. When the hostage rescue operation took place in the middle of the residential neighborhood, the spokesman, Rear Admiral, it's one of the best types of admirals, Daniel Hagari, stated that Israeli forces retaliated with airstrikes because, I don't know, nukes weren't available. According to a police statement, the leader of the Israeli Special Forces, a leader of the Israeli Special Forces, was killed during the operation. After medics had previously reported as many as 100 Palestinian deaths, the Hamas-run government media office in Gaza subsequently stated that the death toll had increased to at least 210, with many more injured. The maximum number was not immediately confirmed by the health ministry in Gaza because they had to count the body parts. It was like a horror movie, but this was a real massacre. Israeli drones and warplanes fired all night randomly at people's houses and at people who tried to flee the area. Zaid, a resident of al-Nusrat, told Reuters. Now, it's a refugee camp, right? Israel has heavily bombed Nusrat, a historic Palestinian refugee camp. There has also been intense ground fighting in the camp's eastern regions. So last week we noticed, Ben Shapiro noticed for us at the end of the episode, if you didn't see that clip, there was some noticing going on. He noticed that this is the only war where Israel has to supply the other side with food and water and electricity so that they can fight back, right? And now you see why, because they're fighting people in refugee camps. What other war was it okay for one side to call in airstrikes on refugee camps? I'm asking. It's like a Jeopardy question. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if this is the new modern definition of like warfare, that's like, it's insane. It's pretty insane.
Yeah, I mean, these people, you're pretty badass to go after people in refugee camps, bro. Like, there must be a real threat to your way of life as you live in your air-conditioned condo, calling in airstrikes from your air-conditioned workplace, wherever you're at, right? Like, I don't know what they expect. I mean, I can see what's going on. I guess it probably went like that with the Nazis too. Like, everyone realized they were Nazis and they kept acting like Nazis, not realizing that everyone found out like what they're up to. That's interesting. So I don't know. History doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme. And Mark Twain, another guy who was funny, probably got ruined by the same type of mentality. You know, Mark Twain, at the end of his life, they financially ruined him, and he was in such great debt. Even though he was like one of the most prolific writers of the day, they ripped him off so bad that he had to go work for the New World Order and travel around the world on their behalf, basically kissing their ass and doing this whole thing. The proof of that is go check out his his lecture at Oxford to get his doctor. It's a D.Lit degree, so it's Doctor of Letters, D.Literati. So like when he's going to the Pilgrim Society and performing, it's because they owned him at that point. Because even though he knew how to do these other things, he didn't know how to run his business. So many sad stories like that. And this bloody massacre times in India. I mean, every place in the Western world is like, Israel rescues 4 hostages, 210 people also killed, right? But they said bloody massacre because they're quoting somebody who actually was in the journal, and they did some journalism and talked to someone from the scene.
So you've done the self-help and you've dipped into some personal development, but now you ask the question, now what? What can you do? Well, if you want to escape the apathy, step right this way. So twice a year, I teach a course called Autonomy. It's a 12-week personal development and training course. What people get out of it is multifaceted. There's curriculum, there's exercises, there's camaraderie, you make new friends. There's a whole lot of interesting things. We're going to hear a sample from the course right now in its ongoing season. Let's take a look at the value these students are getting. And meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man.